Hello, everybody. Tim Ports here on another International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo podcast. Thrilled to be joined this morning by Emily Skor, CEO of Growth Energy. Emily will be delivering our keynote Tuesday morning, June 14th at the FEW General Session. Emily, we're thrilled to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the keynote and FEW in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I think it's going to be terrific. And thanks again for always including us in your rotation. So really appreciate having you on stage. I want to start with some commentary that I actually pulled from the Growth Energy website. U.S. EPA Administrator Michael Regan answered a question about the 2022 RVOs being determined by June 3rd that, and I quote, 2022 will be one of the most aggressive RVOs that we've seen. What does one of the most aggressive RVOs we've seen, to use Regan's language there, look like for Growth Energy, and what kind of number would your membership smile upon, Emily?
Well, so for starters, I agree. If you look at what EPA has proposed for 2022, if they finalize what they've proposed, it will be the most aggressive, and we will certainly smile upon that. And I will say we smile anytime EPA meets the congressional statutory requirements for the RFS. So let's take a look at the numbers of what's proposed for 2022. So you start with the total gallons of renewable fuel, 20.7 billion gallons. That is the highest number that's ever been, proposed or finalized. So that is good in and of itself. Of that, 15 billion gallons in conventional biofuel. That's what we want to see for ethanol. In addition, we've got 250 million gallons that were illegally waived by EPA in 2016. We industry had a lawsuit. The courts found in our favor and said, EPA, you've got to restore those lost gallons. Now, keep in mind, we won that court case in 2017. So we've been waiting 5 years to see these gallons restored. Very, very excited to see them start to be restored in what EPA has proposed. And then, of course, what have we been talking about for years and years? Small refinery exemptions. EPA has really been consistently telegraphing that they're going to take a very different approach to small refinery exemptions and really permanently end the abuse of SREs. So we would anticipate that also would be reflected in what EPA is announcing before June 3rd. So if all of that comes to fruition for 2022, I am smiling ear to ear.
Terrific. I thought this was an interesting quote. Same AgriTalk radio program. Also, Michael Regan, he said, follow the law, follow the science, put this program on sound footing so that biofuels can play the role that Congress intended for it to play. Now, that's a quote that evokes, 15 years ago. And the question I have for you is, does our current Congress remember the role that the Congress of 2007 intended for biofuels to play when they passed the Energy Independence and Security Act? And do they believe in its success and its potential to contribute even more to our country's low carbon fuel independence ambitions?
Well, if you talk about our core congressional champions in the U.S. House and Senate, yes, they absolutely understand that the RFS is intended to drive our nation's energy independence, to spur innovation in rural America, and help achieve climate goals. Having said that, we need to constantly remind members of Congress outside our core base of the purpose of the RFS. And a very good example is when you start talking about compliance and complying with the RFS. One of our biggest adversarial arguments is RINs and the cost of compliance. And as the cost of RINs goes up, we hear a lot more of that in Washington, D.C., because refiners are complaining. And we have to remind Congress and remind EPA and the administration that this is supposed to be a market forcing change. The RFS is about blending more renewable fuel every single year. And so if after 16 years, you still haven't figured out a way to comply and you're still buying your RIN credits, well, that's your business decision. But the ultimate solution to high RIN prices, of course, is always going to be to blend more biofuels. So we do have to remind members of Congress, really outside our core base of the purpose of the RFS. We also actually have to remind sometimes people within our base that the RFS doesn't fall off a cliff in 2023. So often you kind of, over the past couple of years, you've heard this refrain, well, what happens to the RFS after 2022? It is true, there are no congressionally set requirements. There is no 15 billion gallons that Congress has set for 2023 as a requirement. That's where EPA does have more discretion, but EPA still has to set our annual RVOs based on some key parameters. So that's really what we're looking at for 2023 and beyond. And I would say what's been interesting really since February of this year is that energy security, of course, that is back in the forefront of everybody's minds, a key component of the RFS and why it has been effective. So that's something that we're talking about more than we really have been in the past several years.
Interesting, great stuff. The last question I have, and I've said this really only half jokingly, that we could take action at the FEW by setting an over and under on the number of times carbon is said during the FEW general session. Is all of the attention our industry paying to carbon warranted, and why?
Yes. And I will, I joke too that carbon is every third word out of my mouth, and with good reason. We have to remind everyone, every policymaker and consumers, that bioethanol, we are not just good for the rural economy, we are good for a low carbon economy. And that's where we're heading, to a global low carbon economy. We want to remain competitive. We want to be able to compete not just in the light duty vehicle pool, but we want to demonstrate our ability to be a feedstock in the hard to electrify sector. There's a lot of blue sky potential for us there. So I think it's absolutely warranted. That is what's top of mind with this administration. Certainly every decision and policy that they're making is through the lens of climate. And so we have to remind them that, for starters, we are a low carbon fuel today, 46% reduction in carbon. And that advantage continues to grow with the innovation taking place. We then have to remind them that we are the low carbon fuel for tomorrow, that there are areas that we can play, we can help with their goals in the hard to electrify space. Sustainable aviation fuel is a great example. And then also what's really exciting is you look at the kind of the growing breadth and depth of diversity with our co-products, is reminding policymakers that we provide the renewable building blocks for an ever-growing array of value-added products. Not just high protein animal feed, but renewable chemicals, corn oil used in renewable diesel, carbon that we can capture and utilize. So that is the conversation. Those are the table stakes for the big policy decisions for this administration. And it should work to our advantage because we are low carbon. We're also accessible and affordable in today's vehicles.
Emily, thank you so much. Excited to hear more from you on Tuesday, June 14th at the general session of the International Fuel, Ethanol, and Workshop and Expo. I hope you'll all join us in Minneapolis as we welcome Emily to the stage. Emily, thanks so much for making some time for us this morning. We look forward to seeing you in Minneapolis.
Can't wait. Thank you.